Almost all arguments about the COVID responses boil down to the same thing. What is the value of life? Are the lives saved worth the pain and suffering to the community that saves them? The question is very difficult to answer, and engaging with it has stalled some of the most incisive of minds. The reason it is important is that every time someone criticizes the totalitarian response, and voices concern over lost liberty, economic freedom, or repressive laws, the response is to maneuver them into a trap, by challenging them to value the lives lost. The situation for the critic is then hopeless. If they accept and attempt to place value on individuals, then they will be destroyed by anecdote after anecdote. If they decline, then they have demonstrated that they themselves cannot value life, so how can they complain the valuation was wrong? After a few iterations, the public is coerced into thinking that the only moral thing to do is to save all lives at any cost, as all lives are invaluable. You start to believe that the government response was necessary. The lurch to crush freedom and liberty the world over was somehow about saving people. But it is a devious trick. I'll show you how the deception works. It is a trick for two reasons. The first is the argument fails to uphold symmetry. And the second is it fails to uphold democracy. The first problem is that it fails the symmetry test. That is, that although the defenders of totalitarian actions use the trap of asking what is the value of life, they themselves cannot answer it either. The governments do not publicize how they value life. They cannot answer the actual number of lives saved by their measures, the value they place on them, or the point at which it would have been too much. The symmetry test is really powerful. It reveals when an argument is malformed because it contains a misdirection, a sleight of hand. If one side makes a claim, then the symmetric case has to be legitimate too. Attacking your critics because they cannot solve the question of the value of life is only acceptable if you can solve it yourself. Otherwise you are a hypocrite. Our governments have a further problem though. If they did try to answer legitimately, then they would highlight the problems that all governments currently have. COVID is nowhere near the hazard that has been claimed. The cost of the lockdowns and other restrictions on normal people is extreme. Even with the restrictions, COVID is apparently out of control. But there is a second reason it is a trick, and it is much more powerful, democratic and honest than the weasel-worded verbiage of any politician. The real reason it is a trick is that the value of life to the general public has already been answered. We as a society valued life collectively. As individuals we may all disagree, but as a society we agree. This is democracy. Collectively we agreed a certain amount of funding for our health services. We did not meet the patients and allocate life or death to each of them. Instead, as a democratic country we collectively understood that the death rate was a certain amount, that treatments cost a certain amount, and that increasing care would cost more money from our taxes. And we were explicitly okay with that. Just as we were okay with the lives lost in various wars for freedom. We were okay with the economic disparities between our countries. We had already agreed our values when we voted for our governments. If we had wanted the current values, we would have voted for the party proposing to swap liberty for the illusion of safety. Our democratically elected governments then took it upon themselves to ignore that existing value system, and grant themselves incredible powers on the claim of saving lives. They chose to use confusion, and what they thought was the unanswerable question of the value of life to railroad us to totalitarian control. What they missed was that not everyone is confused. We can answer, and we have answered. We rejected their version long before COVID was even heard of. Remember, we vote for our governments to do our will, not for them to betray democracy, seize power and control us. These are tough times. It is more important now, more than ever, to look after each other. Better yourself with every opportunity. Try to become the best human being you can be, because ultimately that is all we can ever hope for. Be kind to each other. FTS